A social media influencer who preached tough love parenting with harsh punishment was handed some harsh punishment of her own today.
Welcome to my channel, Outspoken Samantha. If you are new here, welcome. I would love it if you would help me to grow this channel and hit that subscribe button now. And if you're returning, welcome back. I truly do appreciate your continued support of my channel, and I hope that you are subscribed as well. So today we are going to be covering the latest in the Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt case. The last video that I posted on it, I believe, was in September, and there have been a few things that have happened since then, but I wanted to wait until there were more developments or at least a little bit more substance to talk about. I didn't want to just create a bunch of little videos along the way. I wanted to wait until we had something a little bit more substantial to discuss. And boy, do we ever. Now, I have already created 3 other videos on this case, and they're each between about 45 minutes to an hour long, and I have gone into a lot of detail about Ruby Franke and her family and their background and their popular vlog channel that they had, and about her relationship with her husband Kevin, with a lot of examples about how she treated her kids, which is how she ended up in this mess. And I've also talked in depth about Jodi Hildebrandt and her depraved practices as a so-called therapist, and shared the interviews that past clients / victims have provided to the media of their experiences with her, and just how long of a history she has of using manipulation and brainwashing tactics to abuse people, to break up families, to turn spouses against each other, to influence parents to harm their own children, and a number of other things, all under this guise of therapy. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about the backstory, but I will give you the TLDR version of it in case you don't feel like going back and watching 3 hours of information on this case. So I will just summarize the story as best I can, but if you don't want to hear the summarized version or you're already familiar with this case, I will timestamp the video so you can skip ahead. So just to go a little bit back, Ruby Franke and her husband Kevin had a family vlogging channel from 2015 to 2022, and the channel was called 8 Passengers, which her 6 children were the primary focus of, and it accumulated an audience of about 2.3 million followers. And while they seemed like just a normal family doing all the things that family vlogging channels do, which is to document just the daily life of raising their kids and going shopping and going on vacation and just, doing whatever that for some reason some people find entertaining, no judgment, is just not me. What disturbed people was not just the fact that Ruby and her husband seemed to film and video and share themselves disciplining their children, but that the tactics that they used seemed to be particularly harsh, and the narrative that they would share while disciplining their kids was that they were parenting experts who were just showing other parents how they should be disciplining and raising their kids as well. So people noticed that one of her most popular and seemed to be favorite tactic was to use food as control. She often threatened not to feed her kids if they didn't complete chores or do as they were told. She often used it as a method to teach them, the natural consequences of making poor choices, like forgetting to bring their own lunch to school, and telling them things like, hey, if you didn't bring your lunch to school, then the consequence of that is going to be that you were hungry, and perhaps that will help you learn to take responsibility for what you need during the day and bring your own lunch next time. And this is something that she was trying to instill in her 5-year-old daughter. They also did things like making their children sleep on the cold bathroom floor if they were sick, and they constantly reminded their kids that nothing in the house belonged to them and that they were lucky that she was allowing them to have things like a bed and a bedroom. Her husband Kevin didn't really seem to be a whole lot better, as he just pretty much went along with everything Ruby Franke said and usually participated in the things that she was doing. So outsiders watching this family online, along with people who actually lived in the neighborhood of the Frankes, became concerned about the way that these parents were treating their kids, and there were CPS reports made several times over the years. And even their oldest daughter, who had moved away to college, called for a welfare check on her siblings in September of 2022 because she was worried about their safety and well-being. And I apologize if you guys can hear that. There is somebody doing yard work behind my house somewhere. Anyway, people began to get concerned about what might be happening behind closed doors because the Frankes were so open about their harsh disciplinary methods online. And those fears became a reality when on August 31st of 2023, their youngest son climbed out of a window of a home in Ivins, Utah, and ran to the neighbor's house to beg for food and water. He had duct tape around his wrists and ankles and visible wounds all over his body, and he appeared to be severely emaciated. So the neighbor called 911, and when emergency services got there, he told them that he had a younger sister who was in the home that he had just escaped from. However, the home that he had just broken out of was not his home, but it was actually the home of Jodi Hildebrandt, a family therapist who had been working with the family for several years, apparently trying to help them with their marriage issues and help them with their problematic children. It later came out that Jodi, despite being a psychologist and a family therapist, not only knew about how these kids were being treated, but she is the one who encouraged it. Come to find out that she and Ruby not only regularly bound and tied up this child, but that they would put cayenne pepper and honey on the wounds caused by the rope and the duct tape, and we will get more into the horrifying details of the abuse that these two women carried out on these children later. During the time that Hildebrandt had been working with the Franke family, Ruby Franke had actually shut down her own family vlogging channel and started working alongside Jodi Hildebrandt under Hildebrandt's already established online therapy platform called Connexions Academy, where these two would regularly post videos and podcasts and charge people money for their advice about parenting and raising kids, and using their really strange buzzwords about living in truth and avoiding distortion, which is ironic coming from these two. So after the 911 call, both Franke and Hildebrandt were arrested. The police did find the other daughter in Hildebrandt's home, but they were still trying to locate two of the other kids, which they found later, who had been placed with an associate of Hildebrandt's. Now keep in mind that the oldest daughter is away at college, and their oldest son, it has never been clarified, but I believe that he had been living with his father at this point, but I don't know that 100% for sure. So shortly after this story hit the news, numerous past clients of Jodi Hildebrandt came forward with their own stories about how depraved and evil this woman is, and the countless times throughout her 15 to 20 years in practice as a psychologist that she did manipulate other parents into abusing their own children or allowing her to abuse them, that she had broken up countless marriages and families and poisoned numerous relationships of people who had come to her for help. And as the story unfolded, it was discovered also that under the direction of Jodi Hildebrandt, as a supposed means of saving their marriage, Ruby had ordered Kevin Franke to move out about 13 months earlier, and he had not seen or heard from or spoken to any of his family since then. Ruby had basically told him that this is what needed to happen to save their marriage and save their family, and to not contact them. And if there was ever a family connection re-established, it would be when she decided that it was time. And because he was completely cut off from them, he claims he had no idea that any of what these two women are being charged with now was happening. And supposedly the next time he did hear from her was when she was being arrested. So again, there is a lot to this story. So if you feel like binge watching the entire Franke case as it was unfolding in real time, I will link all 3 videos that I did on this in the description box below. Now, where we left off, Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt were sitting in a jail in Washington County, Utah, waiting for their trial dates. But while all of that was on hold, our attention was shifted to a conflict that unfolded between Sherry, who was the oldest daughter that had been away at college, and her father, Kevin. So apparently Sherry had gone back to the Franke home to gather a few personal items for her younger siblings who were now in state care, and the door had been broken in by police when a search warrant had been issued, but for some reason Kevin thought that it was his own daughter that had broken into the home, and he felt that she should be charged with burglary. He claimed that she took items that she had no right to be in the possession of, including some laptops and electronics, and I believe there was a digital journal of some kind. But the argument was that Kevin had not been in the home for over a year, and that Sherry did not take the items with the intent to deprive him of them.
There you go. Is it all there?
Yes. Yeah, explain to me again why this was not robbery.
Because it's a civil issue. You guys are family. She's been in the house before. You haven't been in the house in a year. She had interest in the items. She didn't take them with the intention to deprive you of them. So theft, that's the theft code. We have to prove intent to deprive you of the items. And that wasn't her intent in having them. So the detective sergeant said that we're not going to charge her for anything.
Okay. I'll have to do some more research on that.
You're welcome to do that. If you want to follow up with our detective, you can yourself.
Okay.
Yeah, he'll be here on Tuesday. His name's Sergeant McCoy. Okay. You're welcome. Take care.
So it seems as though the officer was only too happy to let Kevin know that his daughter had done nothing illegal, and basically that any attempt at retaliation or legal action was pointless. But despite that fact, Kevin seems to think he knows better than these officers, and he knows more about the law than they do, and tells them that he plans to research the issue further, and they're like, you go ahead and do that.
'Cause you're nothing but a big, fat monkey turd.
And just as a reminder, in one of my other videos, it may have been the third one, I'm not sure, we found out that Kevin used to be a professor at BYU, and several of his former students left reviews about him and his class, talking about his extreme arrogance, constantly talking down to them, and pretty much making their time in his class an absolute nightmare. So based on that, this is not a surprising response from him. It actually would have been more shocking had he just been more agreeable and not tried to make it seem like he was the one that's a victim in this situation. Another major update in this situation is that at the end of November, Kevin had decided to file for divorce from Ruby.
Brian, I understand there's also been a big development with respect to Kevin Franke, right?
Today, November 29th, Kevin Franke filed in the state of Utah for divorce, as we understand it. And it was filed actually in the 4th District Court. And the petition for divorce is private, so we can't see a whole lot of it, but we do know that things were filed today here in the state of Utah.
So we don't know the reason for the divorce. I mean, we can assume, but we don't know the actual legal filing, the reason for it.
Domestic relations injunction outlining certain measures to govern the conduct of both parties involved. That is about all I see on it. There are different parts of the injunction that include some prohibitions against harassment, domestic violence, misuse of personal information. So Franke filing for divorce today with not a lot of information, as that petition itself is private, but we're just learning about this right now as of today here on the 29th.
And nobody is surprised that that happened, but let's talk about Jodi Hildebrandt for a minute here. So shortly after the arrest of these two self-declared parenting and marriage experts in the realm of raising healthy children and fostering a loving family environment, the subject of Jodi Hildebrandt's license as a psychologist was definitely called into question, as it should have been a long time ago.
Now, generally, in a situation like this, DOPL would seek to have the person willingly surrender their license. It's unclear whether that will happen in this case. As far as emergency proceedings go, I asked, what does that timeline look like? I'm told it's just as soon as they can convene a meeting of the licensing board, a meeting that could be open to the public. We'll continue to follow this and report back with updates.
Honestly, after the numerous stories that have come out about what were common and abusive and manipulative therapy methods that she used for years on innocent, unsuspecting people, and sometimes even their children, I think we're all wondering why she didn't have her license revoked years ago. And the answer to that question might never be known, but if we listen to one of her past clients who has a particularly horrific story, and this is Adam Steed, anyone who tried to expose her abuse of power and what she was really doing faced severe consequences. And she was really good at lying and being manipulative. And not that it makes much of a difference to her past clients, and it doesn't really make a big difference now because she's behind bars and no one would ever dare to use her services again. She did voluntarily surrender her license around mid-September. So the next update in this case was when Jodi Hildebrandt did plead guilty to several charges of child abuse.
Breaking news in the child abuse case involving Ruby Franke. Her business partner Jodi Hildebrandt pleaded guilty within the past hour to 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. A written plea signed by Hildebrandt was acknowledged by the judge. Her sentencing is set for February 20th.
And then Ruby Franke did the same.
Ms. Franke, how do you plead to count 1, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 3, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 5, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
And to count 6, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
With my deepest regret and sorrow for my family and my children, guilty.
So, of course, the latest update in this case is the fact that both Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt have been charged. But before we look at that, I did find the description of what the potential charges could be for the things that they carried out. I found it rather interesting.
1 to 15 years per count served consecutively. Brian, your reaction?
It makes sense. That's what the judge is going to give based on the plea agreement, but the actual nuts and bolts, the actual years, because that doesn't tell us how many years. It's not 60.
Right. It could be a big difference whether you err on the side of the 1 or the 15, right?
Correct. And so the judge is giving those parameters. The Board of Pardons and Paroles will look at it, understanding that the max that they can give is 30 years because the top charge is a second-degree felony. And based on how they navigate through the system is what we'll understand as how many years in jail they'll serve, as well as any potential parole or probation afterwards.
So let's have a look at what both Ruby and Jodi were sentenced to, what those charges looked like, and also a bit of Ruby Franke's statement in court in response to the sentencing.
Former mom influencer Ruby Franke and her business partner Jodi Hildebrandt are each facing up to 30 years in prison for child abuse. During sentencing, Franke offered a tearful apology with her estranged husband and their 2 children there in court. ABC News Live anchor Kana Whitworth has the latest.
It is important to me to demonstrate my remorse and regret without blame.
A reckoning for the once popular momfluencer turned inmate Ruby Franke, now set to serve up to 30 years in prison for her role in abusing her own young children.
To my babies, my 6 little chicks, you are part of me.
The disgraced mother of 6 sobbing while apologizing to her family.
I took from you all that was soft and safe and good. I took from you your mother. How terrifying this must have been for you.
Franke's estranged husband, Kevin, and their 2 adult children in court. Overnight, Kevin's lawyer telling ABC News these injuries were both physical and psychological, and the scars will remain for a lifetime. The judge handing down the same sentence to Jodi Hildebrandt, who was once an established therapist in the Mormon Church with specialized training and counseling, a skill the judge says makes her more dangerous.
You terrorize children, and the results have been tragic.
Prosecutors likening the conditions Hildebrandt created to a concentration camp-like setting.
They were beaten, and the 12-year-old was regularly bound hand and foot.
Franke claiming Hildebrandt manipulated her through their faith. The 2 often appearing together in Hildebrandt's online life coaching program.
I'm Jodi Hildebrandt, and I'm Ruby Franke.
Hildebrandt, for the first time, speaking out briefly in court.
I sincerely love these children. I desire for them to heal physically and emotionally.
But prosecutors questioning her acceptance of responsibility.
Miss Hildebrandt just has not expressed any remorse.
You think Jodi's going to end up serving more?
I hope that Jodi does serve more. I think that would only be fair.
Franke's attorney alleging that Hildebrandt was a powerful manipulator.
Deception started 4 years ago and progressively increased to the point where I think, truthfully, Ruby lost track of what was right versus wrong.
Now, I know that it is really difficult for any of us to believe that somebody could be influenced and manipulated into abusing their own children. And I am by no means making any excuses for the harm that was carried out on these children by either Ruby or Jodi. I'm just saying, if you look back on the earlier videos of the Franke family, and yes, I think people have always had a few concerns about their parenting methods. I specifically pointed to an incident or a conversation in her earlier videos where she was talking about how, it wouldn't matter to her if her kids didn't follow in their faith and they didn't grow up and choose to continue to be a part of this religion, that she would love them anyways, and that she found it really sad when those type of things happened. Versus more recent videos when she was more heavily involved with Jodi Hildebrandt, that ideology seemed to shift drastically. And there was another video that I pointed to where Jodi and Ruby were sitting on their couch where they regularly did their podcasts, talking about how, if their child didn't listen to them or didn't agree with them, basically that they didn't deserve to be in their life. And so I think that it can't be underestimated, especially when you have somebody who claims to be an expert and they tell you that there are certain things that you're going to have to do to heal your family or to better your home life or to strengthen your marriage. And you're like, well, they're an expert. They know what they're talking about. Therefore, these must be the things that I need to do. And if you listen to all of these other stories that came out about Jodi Hildebrandt, all of them say that it started out pretty normal, started out small, started out, with things that they would normally expect from a therapist, and then it would slowly escalate from there. And we know that Jodi Hildebrandt was working with this family for about 3 to 4 years before this all came to a head. And if you read these articles about the abuse that Ruby Franke was carrying out on her children, she got to the point where she truly believed that they were evil and possessed. It talks about how she tortured her 12-year-old son by making him work outdoors for hours from May 22nd through August 30th and bound his feet when he tried to escape, according to court documents obtained by the Post. During the summer, Franke made the preteen work in the heat without enough water until he had repeated and serious sunburns. She also physically attacked the boy for hours when the child tried to run away in July, and Franke bound his hands and feet. Many times the binding included 2 sets of handcuffs, one on the child's wrists and one on his ankles, according to the harrowing details in the court document. Franke would only treat the boy's wounds with homeopathic remedies and covered with duct tape, which must have been where the honey and the cayenne pepper came from. So again, I'm not excusing this. This behavior was absolutely horrific. And for whatever reason that she carried it out, there are still going to be major consequences for treating anybody this way, let alone a helpless child that cannot escape. But as I was reviewing all of the material, I did see these, a pattern or a significant shift in these behaviors, especially when I learned that Jodi Hildebrandt had been working with this family for a long time. And again, if you think that parents cannot be brainwashed into harming their own children, just look at what is happening every single day in America. What harmful ideas are being taught to children, what harmful ideas are being pushed on families, and what horrific things are parents being influenced to believe are normal for their children, while we have this massive surge in mental health issues amongst these young people. And I'm not going to get too much into that, but there are so many things that are happening, and we just look at this and we're like, how on earth can a parent think this is okay? How on earth can a parent think that this is what is going to help their child grow into being a happy and healthy adult? And I truly believe that manipulation was a huge, massive factor in this case, where again, she got to the point where she truly believed that her children were possessed. But again, that being said, she is absolutely responsible for her own actions because she did commit actual crimes, and she's admitting that she did, and she is not trying to deny any of it, which I can actually appreciate, because she's not standing there going, I did these things because I was manipulated. I'm doing these things because I was brainwashed, and therefore my sentence should be lessened. My sentence should be lightened because I didn't fully understand, the harm that I was causing or any of that. I mean, yes, she does admit at some point in her statement that she was brainwashed, but she's not using that as an excuse to not face accountability for what she did. Jodi, on the other hand, I don't believe one freaking word that this woman says. She has been doing this for years. Just go back and look at the videos of her niece, Jessie, telling her story about facing pretty much exactly the same kind of abuse that the Franke children were facing. And I truly believe that Jodi Hildebrandt is a sociopath. She is a narcissist, and she destroyed so many families over the years, knowingly, willingly, and intentionally. And someone with her lack of ability to actually feel human emotion would have to watch somebody, and in this case, she was probably watching Ruby Franke, and figure out what the proper emotional response would be, and then try to copy what that person is demonstrating in order to figure out how they should act, because they can't come up with those ideas on their own. And to me, that is particularly evident when she says that she loves these children to pieces, or whatever it is that she said, that she loves them so much. And it doesn't even occur to her that that is a completely inappropriate thing to say, that there is a very serious boundary issue as their psychologist to pretend that you love them in the way that their parent does, which is also something that we see a lot in today's society with these weird therapists. So I do not believe for 1 second that Jodi Hildebrandt is remorseful. She did this for as long as she could, and finally, unfortunately, to the harm of these children, but finally it caught up with her. So just as a little bit of a side note for, the way that the family has responded, it turns out that Kevin has filed for guardianship of the kids. I personally am still on the fence about whether or not I think that that is a good idea, because I still have not seen the level of remorse or recognition of the part that even he played up until the point that he moved out. I haven't seen any kind of remorse for that behavior at all. And again, he does seem to be particularly arrogant and has a hint of narcissism himself. And of course, we're not going to hear from the 4 youngest children and how they're doing because they are minors, but this is something that Sherry posted to apparently Instagram back in October, and she says, "There's literally not even words to describe how upside down my life has become. Sherry said God and therapy have saved her lately, as her life appears to become more fulfilling and beautiful despite all of the terrible things going on." And then there's her oldest son, Chad, who very much handled things in his own way. So that is the update on that case, and it has been a lot. So I would love to hear what your guys' thoughts on this. The reaction has been all over the board. Do you think that the punishments are deserved? Do you think that Jodi deserves more time than Ruby, or vice versa? Do you believe the statements that either one of them made in court? I would love to hear all of the things. I have my own thoughts, but I'm interested in what you guys have to say. That being said, please, as I asked in the beginning, help me to grow this channel by hitting that subscribe button now. Be sure that you like this video, share it with anybody that you think would find it interesting. Keep it real, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.